Carnalicious.
What I will do is highlight the things that you can do to prevent or reverse all of the diseases that we've been talking about. Okay, now, as you've seen, we've been going through these colors. Each disease is a different color. But you know what? You can't talk about health and disease without talking about COVID-19. Now, just in case you have not been on this planet for the last few years, is there anybody who has not heard of COVID-19? I don't see any hands. I'm sure there are no hands wherever you are watching. You see, COVID-19 took over the world for a while, right? But you know, right at the beginning, when the pandemic started, especially in England, we were looking over the water to Italy, and we were realizing that certain things were happening. In fact, the National Institute of Health told us that over 99% of the people who died from COVID-19 early in the pandemic had at least one underlying disease. Over 99%. If you didn't have an underlying disease, it was very rare or difficult for you to die from COVID-19. Now, what are these underlying diseases? Yes, indeed, they're the lifestyle diseases that we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks. Asthma, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease. What it's saying is that these diseases have weakened the system so that when a virus comes along, it becomes incredibly difficult to survive from it. Let me give you an illustration. I think a lifestyle disease is a bit like having a bear stalking you in the distance. I don't know if anybody has had a bear stalking you in the distance. If it's far away, okay, you don't want it there, but it's not imminently behind me, so it's not going to kill me. And that's a bit like having a lifestyle disease. You can have diabetes, you don't want it, but you know what? I'll put up with going to the hospital. I'll put up with the medication. I'll put up with the kind of lifestyle change. And that's like the bear stalking at a distance. But what happened when COVID-19 came along is that bear came right up on your shoulder and is now imminently going to kill you. Diabetes that you could live with for decades on medication was now a lethal element in your life. And that is why we try to eliminate all of these lifestyle diseases before the problem happens. Because believe me, there will be another pandemic. Believe me, there will be other stresses in your life that put strain on your body, where if it is weakened by a lifestyle disease, it may be fatal when it doesn't need to be. Before I move on from COVID, let me just explain to you that pretty much all of the viruses that we ever get have their origins in animals. Even if it was generated in a lab, the lab still got that virus from an animal. And it tells us something. Look, first of all, we shouldn't be consuming them. We don't need them to be healthy. And the next thing, we shouldn't be abusing them, because really, when they're clogged together, farmed together in these little cages and they've got no sunlight, it's really cruel for the animals as well. And it's not good for our health. Have a look at this. I think I should start with the heart. If we're going to talk about disease, because heart disease is still globally the biggest killer, why don't we start with heart? What things can we do to prevent or reverse heart disease? I'm sure you're all great students, you've all had it written down, but let me remind you, one of the most important things you can do to reverse heart disease is to have a healthy plant-based diet. I mentioned earlier that when I was doing cardiothoracic surgery up in Cambridge, heavy work, really heavy work. We had to do 3 of these bypasses every single day. Enormously tiring. But what we had to do is open up somebody's chest, stop their heart, link it up to a big contraption, and then try and close them all up again. It was a big, big deal. The person would be in pain for months. They'd need rehabilitation. And then, at least, if it was a successful operation, they'd be alive. But evidence has shown us from years ago that just by changing your diet into a healthy plant-based diet, no meat, no milk, no refined sugar, those arteries that were closing down can now open up. Now, for me, even today, I've been doing this for many, many years. It's still miraculous to me that you can reverse one of the biggest problems in the world in terms of health just by changing your diet. You can get rid of doctors like me and you can just replace it with a healthy diet. That is amazing, and I commend it to all of you. Some of you may have heart disease today. You may have an appointment to see a doctor in a few weeks or months. I can guarantee you, if you go onto a healthy plant-based diet today, by the time you see the doctor, you may not even need an operation. I guarantee that's true. I've seen it with my own eyes. So that's heart disease. What about high blood pressure? If I was to ask you, do you know somebody with high blood pressure? Everybody would say yes. It's such a prevalent disease. Now, what few tips have I given you to reverse high blood pressure? Well, plant-based diet is absolutely good. You have to exercise. We've seen Teeny skipping along this very stage, demonstrating how we have to exercise. It's brilliant. Water. I think water is one of the simplest things you can do to lower your blood pressure. Remember the example I gave you. If you were swimming in a lake, that's fine. If you were swimming in a lake of honey, that will be incredibly difficult because it's so thick. And that's what happens to your blood. If you don't have enough water in it, it becomes incredibly thick. You then have to use a lot of energy to push that blood round the system. Therefore, your blood pressure has to rise. Here's something though, going on from the plant-based diet, we said that greens do something quite remarkable in our arteries. They get the interior of our arteries to release a chemical called nitric oxide. That nitric oxide opens up the arteries all over. I told you nitric oxide is the active ingredient of Viagra. Okay, I know none of you have heard of it, none of you need to use it, but I can tell you when it comes to things like erectile dysfunction, rather than reaching for the pill, the best thing to do is reach for those greens. And let me remind you, gentlemen, because this is very important, if you have an episode of erectile dysfunction, you're at a high risk of having a heart attack or a stroke in the next 5 years. So rather than just going to the pill, start thinking about changing your lifestyles. Number 3, cancer. What things have we said about cancer? Well, I always tell people, and I've been speaking to a lot of people in the clinics throughout the weeks, if you have cancer, there are certain things that you must do. Cancer loves sugar. You must eliminate refined sugar. Vitamin D is key. You must have high levels of vitamin D. I recommend 20,000 units per day. Along with that, vitamin C, high dose. I have seen with my very own eyes people on high doses of vitamin C having their cancer reversed. We cannot guarantee it. Don't quote me. You can't guarantee it. But I have seen people on high doses of vitamin C have their cancer reversed. And remember, if you do have cancer, you must seek medical advice. I told you earlier during the week that those people who just say, I just want to go the natural route, often they don't survive. What you must do is seek medical attention and do the lifestyle, and then you have the best possible chance of surviving cancer. Medical attention alone does something, but it doesn't do everything. I remember when I used to be in the hospitals, the doctors would treat you for cancer and then allow you to eat the same foods that would cause cancer. That doesn't make any sense. So hospital treatment is good, but match that with lifestyle change, you've got a great chance of getting through, honestly. Now, what else can you do for cancer? I always say you should spice up your life. Spice up your life. Spices are really the keys to a healthy lifestyle too. They're like nature's natural drugs. The more spices you have in your life, the better your cells are going to be. Turmeric, most of us have heard of turmeric. It's a powerful antioxidant. And if you take away the oxidation of your cells, it reduces the risk of cancer. Ginger is like it. It's also anti-inflammatory. Cinnamon is brilliant. Cinnamon, not only does it lower your blood sugar, which if you have low blood sugar, the cancer doesn't grow too well, But cinnamon is brilliant in terms of fighting off viruses. In fact, they discovered this over 100 years ago. The women who harvested the cinnamon bark never got measles, never got tuberculosis. And cinnamon, if you have anybody in your family who has any kind of viral illness, you give everyone in the household cinnamon, it's less likely that you'll get the infection. Cardamom is very interesting because it actually makes you make more natural killer cells. They have a lethal name, but they do an awful lot of good. They're the white blood cells that defeat cancer.